3 years of marriage end with a $1 check. And a divorce petition thrown in my face by Julian Sterling. He thinks I am a gold digger. But he is standing on the software empire I built in secret. And now, my countdown to take it back begins. Julian stands in the center of the Manhattan ballroom, holding a crystal glass, his eyes cold as the ice within it. 500 guests watch in silence, while the sound of his expensive leather shoes clicks against the marble floor. He tosses a thick envelope onto the white tablecloth, right next to our 3-year anniversary cake. I see the bold letters of the Sterling Tech logo, and the word divorce printed in black ink. He leans in, his breath smelling of expensive bourbon, and whispers that I am a liability to his brand. He pulls out a check, signed with a flourish, for exactly $1. "This is your compensation for the service," he says, loud enough for the front row to hear. A wave of muffled laughter ripples through the crowd, like the sound of dry leaves crushing underfoot. Julian turns to the woman standing beside him, Chloe Sinclair, who wears a smirk as sharp as her stiletto heels. She reaches for a glass of red wine, tilting it slowly. The dark liquid cascades over my head, soaking my white silk dress, and dripping onto the legal documents. "You are trash, Evelyn, and trash belongs in the gutter," Chloe says, her voice dripping with fake pity. I do not flinch. I do not cry. I simply wipe a drop of wine from my cheek. The guests begin to whisper, calling me a failed investment and a gold digger who finally hit a wall. Julian watches me, expecting a scene, expecting me to beg for a higher settlement. He forgets that the prenuptial agreement, the one he forced me to sign, has a very specific clause. I am allowed to keep every intellectual property that I brought into the marriage, or created during it. He thinks I spent my nights shopping on Fifth Avenue, while I was actually writing the core code for Aegis, the system that currently runs every bank, every hospital, and every server in his company. Julian points toward the door, where 2 large security guards are already moving toward me. "Take her out, and make sure she leaves with nothing," he orders, turning back to his guests. The guards grab my arms, their grip tight and bruising, and pull me toward the exit. I hear the heavy thud of the penthouse doors closing, locking me out of the life I built for him. I stand on the sidewalk, the neon lights of Times Square reflecting in the puddles at my feet. I reach into my small clutch and pull out a burner phone, its screen glowing in the dark. I type a single command into the command line interface and hit the enter key. The countdown on the screen starts at 10 seconds, blinking in a steady, crimson rhythm. I walk away from the Sterling Tower, without looking back once, listening to the city pulse around me. My heels click on the pavement, a steady beat that matches the ticking of the digital clock in my pocket. 10, 9, 8. My mind counts down as I visualize the server room on the 90th floor. The Aegis system is a masterpiece, a living architecture of logic that I designed to be loyal only to me. Julian never bothered to check the subdirectories or the hidden kernel, where the real power lies. He was too busy, flashing my work at board meetings and taking credit for my late-night breakthroughs. 7, 6, 5. I pass a shop window, seeing my reflection, a woman stained in red wine, but with eyes of steel. I am not the trophy wife anymore. I am the ghost in his machine, the architect of his destruction. 4, 3, 2. I reach the corner of the block and stop to look at the tower one last time. It stands tall, a monument to his ego, glowing with 10,000 lights, powered by my code. 1. 0. Execute. A low hum vibrates through the ground, and for a split second, the giant Sterling Tech logo flickers and dies. The lights in the penthouse, where the party is still raging, begin to pulse in an erratic pattern. The elevators in the building, according to my screen, have all stopped, between the floors, trapping the elite inside. Inside the ballroom, the music would be stopping now, replaced by the frantic beeps of 100 failing servers. Julian will be looking at his phone, seeing the red alert that his entire network is under a critical failure. He will try to enter his master password, the one I gave him, but the system will reject it. Every terminal in the building will be displaying a message, written in the simplest English possible. Access denied. Unauthorized user. Property of Alpha. He will scream at his engineers, but they will find that the source code has encrypted itself into a billion pieces. The Aegis system is not breaking. It is simply coming home, to the woman who gave it life. My bank account, the secret one, Julian never found, pings with a notification of a $5 million transfer. This is the first of many automated royalties that the system is now redirecting to its rightful owner. I stand in the middle of the New York crowd, a ghost among the living, feeling the power return to my veins. The $1 check, still clutched in my hand, feels like a weapon rather than a piece of paper. I will use this dollar to buy back his soul, piece by piece, until he has nothing left but the clothes on his back. Julian thinks he threw me out, but I am the one who just evicted him from reality. Suddenly, my phone vibrates with a call from an unknown number, which I know is Julian. He must be desperate. His voice will be shaking as he realizes his empire is a house of cards. I decline the call and block the number because the conversation is over and the war has begun. I see a black town car pull up to the curb, its tinted windows reflecting the chaos of the city. The door opens, and Marcus Thorne, the most feared lawyer in the state, steps out onto the sidewalk. He looks at my wine-stained dress, and then at the dark tower behind me, with a faint smile. "You are late, Evelyn," he says, his voice a low rumble that promises a storm for the Sterling family. I step into the car, the leather seat cool against my skin, and tell him to drive to the safe house. We have 3 years of records to file and a hostile takeover to execute by Monday morning. As the car pulls away, I look at the $1 check and realize it is the most valuable thing I have ever owned. It is the proof of his arrogance, the evidence of his greed, and the key to his prison cell. Sterling Tech is no longer a company. It is a crime scene, and I am the lead investigator. The city of New York looks different tonight. It looks like a chessboard, and I finally have the white pieces. The red emergency lights pulse like a dying heart inside the penthouse of the Sterling Tower. Julian Sterling just threw me out with a $1 check, claiming I am a liability to his brand. He has no idea that the Aegis system, the core of his billion-dollar company, belongs to me. I have 3 years of secrets, and tonight, I am taking them all back. Julian is screaming at his chief technology officer, his face twisted in a mask of rage, while the shadows dance against the walls. Chloe is sobbing, because the air conditioning has stopped, and the Manhattan humidity is ruining her expensive silk dress. The guests are stumbling in the dark, their diamond jewelry clinking. As they search for the exits, Julian tries to reboot his laptop, but the screen remains black, except for a single white cursor. He slams his fist onto the mahogany desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Through the silent room, the chief technology officer, Leo, stammers that the entire infrastructure has been hijacked by an unknown protocol. He says the firewall did not even blink, as the intruder wiped the administrative privileges of every executive. Julian grabs Leo by the collar, his knuckles white, and demands to know who Alpha is. Leo can only stare at the screen, his hands trembling, as he explains that Alpha is the primary architect of the system. Julian realizes that the man he paid $5 million to, as a consultant last year, has no idea how to fix this. The empire he built on stolen pride is beginning to crumble, and he has no tools to stop it. I watch the lights of the city through the tinted glass of the black Cadillac. Marcus Thorne holds a tablet, its blue light illuminating his sharp features, as he tracks the stock market. Sterling tech stock has already dropped 12% in the last 30 minutes, and the panic is just beginning. Every major hedge fund in New York is receiving automated alerts that the Aegis system is unstable. I tell Marcus to activate the first 3 shell companies based in the Cayman Islands. He nods, his fingers moving across the screen as he places buy orders for small blocks of shares. We are catching the falling knife, picking up pieces of Julian's heart at a 70% discount. Marcus asks if I am sure about leaving the main servers in a state of total lock. I smile, looking at the $1 check that I have tucked into my glove. I am not locking them. I am simply reclaiming the intellectual property that belongs to me. Julian thought he was buying a wife, but he was actually hosting a Trojan horse for 3 years. Every line of code I wrote, every update I installed, was a brick in a prison I was building for him. I watched the ticker symbol for Sterling Tech turn a deep shade of crimson. $1 billion of market cap has vanished into the night air, and I am the one who breathed it away. Back at the tower, the server room is a furnace because the cooling units have failed. Julian stands behind Leo, watching the lines of code, scrolling past at a frantic speed. The letters are shifting, changing from English to ancient Greek, and then to mathematical symbols. It is a polymorphic virus, Leo whispers, his voice filled with a terrifying respect for the Creator. He says the system is not dying. It is evolving, and it is rejecting the Sterling Tech hardware. Julian looks at the monitor, seeing a small icon in the corner that looks like a stylized letter A. He remembers seeing that same symbol on a scrap of paper in Evelyn's home office months ago. He dismissed it as a doodle, a bored housewife's attempt at being creative while he worked. Now he realizes that the housewife was not bored. She was calculating the trajectory of his downfall. He grabs his phone and tries to call the security team, but his service is restricted. The phone displays a simple message, informing him that his account has been suspended for non-payment. I cut his line. As I sat in the car, using the master override, he never knew I possessed. Julian throws the phone against the server rack, the glass shattering into 1,000 pieces. He is losing control of the very air he breathes, and the walls are closing in. Chloe tries to wrap her arms around Julian's waist, whispering that everything will be fine once the sun comes up. She tells him to call her father, who can lend him $10 million to bridge the gap. Julian shoves her away, his eyes wild, and tells her to shut her mouth. Her father's money is tied to the performance of Aegis, and if Aegis fails, her father is bankrupt too. The realization hits Chloe like a physical blow, and her face turns pale. Under the layers of makeup, she realizes that the man she chose is not a king, but a thief who has been caught. Julian paces the room, stepping over the discarded anniversary gifts that are now worthless piles of junk. He remembers the $1 check and the way he laughed as he threw it at me. It was his biggest mistake, because that dollar was a legal acknowledgement of a debt. In the car, Marcus explains that by giving me that check, Julian inadvertently admitted that our marriage was a commercial arrangement. This allows us to bypass the primary clauses of the prenup and sue for unpaid labor. We are going to charge him $100,000 an hour for every second I spent building his empire. He thought he was saving money, but he just signed a check for his own destruction. The board of directors is now calling Julian's private line through the emergency radio frequency. He picks up the handset, hearing the voice of the chairman, who is screaming about fiduciary duty. The chairman tells him that if the system is not up by the opening bell on Monday, he is fired. Julian tries to lie, telling them it is a minor glitch caused by a routine update. The chairman laughs, a cold and hollow sound, and tells Julian that they know about Alpha. An anonymous tip was sent to the Wall Street Journal, including screenshots of the system's core. The world now knows that Julian Sterling does not know how to code a single line. He is a fraud, a marketing suit, who climbed to the top on the back of a ghost. I listen to the radio traffic through Marcus's receiver and feel a cold satisfaction. The dopamine hits my brain like a lightning strike as I hear Julian's voice break under the pressure. He is no longer the lion of Wall Street. He is a cornered rat, looking for a hole to hide in. I tell Marcus to leak the second set of documents regarding the tax evasion. We are not just taking his company, we are taking his freedom, and every cent he ever hid. Julian finally finds a single file that is not encrypted on his personal cloud drive. The file is titled, "For Julian," and he clicks it with trembling fingers. A video starts to play, showing me sitting in his chair at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 weeks ago. I am looking directly into the camera, my expression neutral, my voice calm and steady. I tell him that by the time he sees this video, he will be a poor man. I explain that the Aegis core has already migrated to a decentralized network that he cannot reach. I hold up the prenup and show him the hidden ink that only appears under ultraviolet light. I had him sign a document that was actually a transfer of rights, disguised as a standard amendment. He signed his life away while he was drunk on success and too arrogant to read the fine print. The video ends with me blowing a kiss to the camera and the screen turning black. Julian looks at the darkness and finally understands that he never knew the woman he married. He reaches for a glass of water, but his hand shakes so hard that the glass shatters on the floor. He is standing in the ruins of a kingdom he never owned, and the queen has taken the keys. Julian Sterling is auctioning his soul to pay for the empire I destroyed, while his mistress crawls through the jewelry vault, trying to salvage her future. He thinks he is selling art, but he is actually handing me the weapons I will use to bury him forever. The grand ballroom of the Sterling penthouse is a morgue of luxury, where Julian stands beside a velvet podium, his shirt collar stained with a thick layer of sweat. He is selling off his grandfather's vintage car collection and his original Warhol paintings to stop the bleeding of his company stock price. The auctioneer calls for $50,000, then $60,000, while Julian watches the numbers with the eyes of a drowning man. He has lost $300 million in the last 48 hours, and every cent counts toward his survival. Chloe Sinclair sits in the front row, her hands trembling, as she pretends to be a supportive partner, but her eyes are darting toward the hallway. She knows the Sinclair family accounts are being frozen by the banks, and Julian is no longer her golden ticket to a life of leisure. The air in the room is heavy, with the smell of expensive perfume and the bitter scent of a dying dynasty. I watch him from the shadows of the mezzanine, feeling the cold weight of the $1 check, still tucked inside my glove. He thought he was rid of me, but I am the one who holds the lease to his reality. Chloe slips away from the crowd, her footsteps silent on the thick Persian carpet. As she enters the master bedroom suite, she reaches for the safe, hidden behind a framed mirror, and tries to enter the code she memorized months ago during a night of Julian's drunken boasting. The heavy steel door swings open, revealing rows of diamonds and gold watches that Julian bought using the royalties from my software. She grabs a handful of emerald necklaces, stuffing them into her designer clutch, her face twisted with a frantic and ugly greed. Suddenly, the lights in the vault flicker, and a voice over the intercom tells her that unauthorized access has been recorded by the private security firm. She freezes, the cold metal of a sapphire bracelet slipping from her fingers and hitting the floor with a sharp and echoing click. Julian is too busy, trying to sell his pride to the highest bidder, to notice that his lover is looting the wreckage of his life. I watch the security feed on my phone, seeing her crawl on the floor like a thief, and I feel a surge of pure dopamine. The girl who hat Rue Valmat toy is now a common criminal, caught in a trap of her own making. I step through the front doors of the penthouse, wearing a black tailored suit that costs more than Julian's remaining liquid cash. Marcus Thorne walks beside me, his presence causing a silence to spread through the room like a cold and suffocating fog. Julian looks up from his podium, his eyes widening in shock, as he sees the woman he threw out, like trash 2 days ago. I do not look at him. I look at the item, currently on the auction block, which is a gold pocket watch. It belonged to my father, a master watchmaker, whose life's work Julian stole through a predatory loan 10 years ago. The auctioneer asks for a starting bid of $20,000, but the room remains quiet as a grave. I raise my hand, my voice steady and cold, as I bid $100,000 for the memory Julian tried to erase. Julian grips the edge of the podium, his knuckles white, as he realizes that the $1 check he gave me was the last time he will ever feel superior. I can see the veins in his neck, throbbing with a mixture of fear and a desperate need to maintain control over his guests. I raise the bid again. to $200,000 when a desperate bidder from the back tries to challenge my authority. I am not buying a watch. I am reclaiming my bloodline, and Julian is just the pathetic middleman who failed to protect it. Marcus whispers that Chloe has been caught by the security team I hired to monitor the penthouse safe during the auction. He shows me the live feed, where Chloe is being held in the hallway with $3 million worth of jewelry in her bag. I nod, telling the auctioneer that I will pay $500,000 in cash to end the bidding for my father's legacy right now. The gavel falls, the sound echoing like a final judgment, as the gold pocket watch is handed to me in a velvet box. Julian stumbles toward me, his face red with a mixture of rage and desperation. As he tries to grab my arm, I step back, letting the security guards block his path. As I open the box and wind the watch for the first time in years, the steady ticking is the only sound in the room, a reminder that Julian's time has officially run out. I lean in, whispering so only Julian can hear, that Chloe is currently being arrested in his bedroom for grand larceny. I tell him that her father has already signed over his remaining shares of Sterling Tech to my holding company in exchange for my silence. Julian sinks to his knees, his expensive suit wrinkling against the marble floor, as the guests begin to realize that the new owner of the tower has arrived. I walk toward the exit, my heels clicking on the floor, leaving the man who thought he could buy my soul behind in the dust. I stop at the door, turning back to look at the crowd, and announce that Sterling Tech is now officially Vance Technology. Every person in the room who laughed at my expense 2 days ago suddenly stands up, trying to offer their fake congratulations. I ignore them all, because I have no use for the loyalty of vultures who only follow the scent of fresh money. As I step into the elevator, Marcus informs me that Julian's father has just landed at Teterboro Airport with a team of investigators. The old man, the real founder of the dynasty, has come to reclaim his name, and he is not going to be as easy to break as his son. The sound of the heavy oak doors slamming shut behind the federal agents is the first indication that Arthur Sterling has officially arrived in New York City. I am sitting in a high-end restaurant in Midtown with Marcus Thorne when the lead investigator walks toward our table and flashes a badge that carries the weight of Washington, D.C. He tells me that I am being summoned to the district attorney's office for a preliminary hearing regarding 24 counts of industrial espionage and grand theft of intellectual property. Marcus stands up, his jaw set in a hard line, and reminds the agent that his client has committed no crime. But the agent simply points to a black SUV waiting outside the window. Arthur Sterling has used his political connections to freeze the paperwork for my company's name change, and now he is coming for my head. I do not show fear. I simply pick up my father's pocket watch and place it in my pocket, feeling the steady ticking against my palm. We are led to the car, while the patrons of the restaurant whisper about the fall of the Vance Empire before it even began. Arthur is not like his son. He does not yell, and he does not waste time with petty insults. He is a predator who waits for the perfect moment to strike the jugular, and he has just found his opening. The interrogation room at the prosecutor's office is cold and smells of stale coffee. and the fear of 1,000 criminals. Arthur Sterling sits at the head of the long metal table, looking like a king who has returned to find his throne occupied by a peasant. Julian is sitting next to him, his face bruised and his eyes downcast, looking like a broken toy that his father is trying to fix. Arthur looks at me, his eyes 2 chips of gray ice, and tells me that I am a damaged piece of equipment that should have been liquidated years ago. He lays out a stack of documents on the table, claiming that every line of code in the Aegis Core was developed using Sterling Tech resources and therefore belongs to the company. He cites the work-for-hire doctrine, a legal cage designed to keep the creators in the service of the capitalists. He says that as Julian's wife and a supposed employee of the firm, I had a fiduciary duty to turn over all my inventions for 0 compensation. Julian looks up, a small and pathetic spark of hope in his eyes as he realizes his father might actually save him from the gutter. I lean back, my fingers interlaced, and listen to the old man describe the prison cell he has already built for me. In his mind, Arthur tells the district attorney, who is standing in the corner, that my arrest will be a victory for corporate America and a warning to all gold diggers. He calls me a liability, a parasite that drained his son's energy while stealing the crown jewels of the Sterling family. He says the $1 check Julian gave me was a symbolic payment for my exit and has no legal standing in a court of intellectual property. The DA looks at Marcus, expecting a defense based on emotion or a plea for a settlement, but Marcus simply smiles and pulls out a laptop. I open a file that Julian signed during the 2nd year of our marriage, a document he never bothered to read because he was too busy buying a yacht in Saint-Tropez. It is a series of tax filings and independent contractor agreements that Julian signed to avoid paying the employer's share of my Social Security and health care to save himself a few $1,000s in taxes. Julian officially categorized me as a vendor, an outside entity with no employee status. This means the work-for-hire doctrine does not apply to me because I was never, according to the IRS, a part of the Sterling Tech payroll. Julian's greed has become the very rope that is now tightening around his father's neck. Arthur's face turns a deep shade of purple as he grabs the documents and reads the fine print, his hands shaking with a silent fury. He looks at Julian, who is staring at the table, in total shock, realizing that his tax evasion scheme has just destroyed his father's legal strategy. I tell Arthur that by classifying me as a vendor, Julian granted me the status of a third-party developer who retains all rights unless a written transfer of ownership is signed. I ask him to find a single document where I transferred the Aegis Core to Sterling Tech, and he remains silent because he knows it does not exist. Marcus then reveals the hidden amendment from the 2nd chapter of this war, the one Julian signed with invisible ink. It is a master service agreement that states the vendor, Evelyn Vance, owns the primary license to all software hosted on Sterling servers. Arthur realizes that the trap was set 2 years ago, and he has just walked right into the center of it. The DA clears his throat, looking at the investigators, and tells them that the charges of industrial espionage cannot be sustained under these facts. He tells Arthur that this is a civil matter, and the state has no interest in pursuing a woman who simply followed the law. I stand up, looking directly into Arthur's eyes, and tell him that his son is a bad investment, a liability that he should have liquidated decades ago. I tell him that the name Vance Technology will be on the front of the building by tomorrow morning, and there is nothing his Washington friends can do to stop it. Julian begins to sob, his head in his hands, but Arthur silenced him with a single look of pure and unfiltered disgust. Arthur tells me that I am clever, but I am still trash, and the Sterling family has deeper pockets than I can imagine. He says he will file a motion to freeze my assets based on a hidden clause in the Sterling family trust that forbids the transfer of technology to non-blood relatives. He smiles, a cruel and cold expression, and says that the trust predates our marriage and even the existence of Sterling Tech itself. It is a legal anchor that has been at the bottom of the ocean for 50 years, and he is now pulling it up to crush me. I look at Marcus, who looks concerned for the first time, as Arthur explains that the trust owns the physical land under the tower and every piece of hardware inside it. He is going to evict my software from his hardware and watch my company die in the streets of New York. Arthur walks out of the room, his head held high, leaving the smell of expensive cologne and a sense of impending doom behind him. Julian follows him, like a kicked dog, without looking back, while the agents begin to pack up their files. I stand in the middle of the interrogation room, feeling the weight of the city pressing down on my shoulders. Marcus tells me that the family trust is a formidable weapon, and we need to find a way to break the bloodline requirement, or we will lose everything. He says the only way to override the trust is to prove that Julian is not the rightful heir, or that there is another secret claimant with a higher priority. I think about my father and the watch in my pocket, and a memory of a conversation between my parents flashes through my mind. My father always said that Arthur Sterling stole more than just his business. He stole his future and his very name. I tell Marcus to look into the birth records of the Sterling family. In the year 1992, in a small town in upstate New York, there is a secret buried in the mud of the past that Arthur is trying to hide, and I am going to dig it up with my bare hands. The legal trap was just the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous game of blood and betrayal. I walk out of the prosecutor's office into the cold night air, seeing the black Cadillac waiting for me at the curb. I look at the Sterling Tower in the distance, seeing the lights flickering as the Aegis Corps continues its migration. I have 12 hours to find the hole in the trust, or Arthur will pull the plug on my dream and leave me with nothing but a $1 check. I reach into my pocket and feel the watch, and I realize that the ticking is not just the passage of time. It is the sound of a secret waiting to be revealed. I am not just a developer. I am the daughter of a man who was destroyed by the Sterlings and I am the instrument of their final judgment. I tell Marcus to drive to the city archives and to prepare for a long night of searching through the shadows of history. The war for the empire has moved from the boardroom to the bloodline, and I am the only one. Who knows where the bodies are buried? Arthur Sterling thinks he is a king, but he is just a man who has forgotten the faces of the people he crushed on his way to the top. I am going to remind him that the trash he threw out has a memory like an elephant and a sting like a viper. As the car pulls away, I see a figure standing in the shadows of the building, watching me with an intensity that makes the hair on my neck stand up. It is not Julian, and it is not Arthur. It is someone else. Someone from my past, who I thought was dead. The shadow of the man standing in the dark alley makes my heart stop, his breath carrying the smell of nightmares and the truth I have been searching for over 10 years. Silas Vance, the brother I thought died in that horrific accident, steps into the dim Manhattan light with a jagged scar running down his jawline. He does not hug me. He simply hands me an old diary, wrapped in the frayed leather of our father, a treasure containing secrets that could burn all of New York to the ground. Silas whispers that Arthur Sterling is not the legal heir to this dynasty, but a master imposter who stole another man's life. Our father discovered this secret before Arthur pushed him to the edge and stripped away his entire life's work. Silas says the hospital records from 1992 were wiped from the system, but he kept the original copy of the most important blood test. Arthur is actually the son of a maid, a man who swapped identities with the real heir during a fire at the orphanage that winter. This means the entire Sterling family trust, which Arthur is using to threaten me, actually belongs to the Vance bloodline, and I am the one holding the keys to the kingdom. I stand before the lobby of the Sterling Tower, watching dozens of cardboard boxes containing my personal belongings being tossed onto the filthy pavement by security guards, right in front of the lenses of hundreds of hungry reporters. Julian stands beside his father, his lips curled into a smirk of absolute contempt as he looks at my silk dress and old books scattered on the ground like piles of trash. Arthur Sterling steps closer, using his $5,000 polished leather shoes to grind down the only wedding photo we have, and says I am just an outsider, a bad debt being purged from the body of the Sterling Empire. The crowd around us begins to laugh, calling me a failure, a gutter rat who was just evicted from the Gold Castle by a king with no mercy. I do not pick anything up. I simply stand straight, my eyes locked onto Arthur, who is enjoying his fake victory in the most arrogant way possible. Marcus Thorne stands by my side, his hand gripping the folder Silas just delivered, his face no longer showing worry, but a calm that is terrifying. I move closer to Arthur, the distance only a few inches, enough for me to smell his expensive cigars and the decay rotting inside the soul of this imposter. You are wearing a dead man's suit, Arthur, and you think owning this land makes you the real master, but you are dead wrong. I speak very quietly, my voice like a cold blade cutting through the noise of the reporters, causing the smile on his face to suddenly freeze into a block of ice. I tell him that I know about the 1992 hospital records, and about the poor maid who helped him swap his identity. Arthur's eyes shift from arrogance to horror in a fraction of a second, an instinctive reaction that only those carrying heavy crimes truly understand. He tries to order security to drag me away, but I hold up the copy of the blood test high so all the live cameras can record every single word. I declare loudly that the Sterling Family Trust does not belong to an imposter, and I will begin legal proceedings immediately to reclaim every cent he stole from my family. Julian looks at his father, shock and suspicion clear on his face, as he realizes he is also just a nobody if this secret is fully exposed to the public. The reporters swarm Arthur, firing off a barrage of questions about his origins, while security begins to lose control of the chaotic crowd. I turn my back and walk away, not needing to take any of my old things, because I know this tower will soon belong to me according to the law and the justice of my bloodline. Silas disappears into the crowd behind the skyscrapers like a ghost who just finished a mission of revenge, leaving a wave of chaos over the busy Wall Street district. Marcus Thorne opens the door of the black car for me, a rare smile appearing on his lips, as he says this psychological blow has completely destroyed Arthur's credibility before the major shareholders. Sterling tech stock is plummeting on the electronic charts because the financial market never trusts a leader with an unclear identity and a stained past. I look at my father's watch in my palm, feeling its ticking stronger than ever, as if his soul is cheering me on from the void. The game is no longer about software or money. It is about burning down the entire lie that the Sterling family built over half a century, using the blood and tears of others. I will not stop until Arthur Sterling is standing exactly where he put me today, on the filthy sidewalk with nothing but his bare hands. Marcus Thorne informs me that the orders to freeze my assets have been neutralized by an emergency ruling from the state Supreme Court based on the new evidence of identity fraud. We have 12 hours to file a formal lawsuit in federal court before Arthur can move his assets to offshore accounts in Switzerland. I order Marcus to contact all the major television networks to prepare for an exclusive interview where I will expose the entire truth about the Sterling bloodline. Julian Sterling is frantically texting me, begging for a chance to talk, but I simply hit the delete button and block his number forever from my life. He is not my husband. He was just a mistake I corrected with $1, and now I will erase his existence from the New York elite. The car glides through the night toward Marcus's office, where we will draft the death warrant for the Sterling Empire. Tonight, New York City will not sleep, because the ghost of the past has returned, and it is reclaiming what rightfully belongs to it. Arthur Sterling may have money and political connections, but he does not have the truth, and that is the fatal weakness of a dictator. I open my father's diary, reading the last words he wrote in tears about the hope that one day I would find justice. Every word sinks into my skin, giving me an invisible power to face the monster hiding behind the reinforced glass of that tower. Silas has prepared the witnesses, the old servants from 1992 who were bribed or threatened by Arthur to remain silent for all this time. Now, seeing the collapse of the Sterling name, they are ready to stand up in exchange for protection and a piece of the truth. Marcus looks at me through the rearview mirror, his eyes full of admiration for the woman who turned humiliation into a weapon of mass destruction. I am no longer the weak Evelyn Vance. I am the real Sterling, and I am coming to collect what is mine. The black Cadillac stops in front of Marcus Thorne's office, but the sidewalk is blocked by a white ambulance, with its lights pulsing in a silent and predatory rhythm. I step out of the car, my fingers brushing the leather of my father's watch, when 4 men in white medical scrubs move toward me with a synchronized and terrifying precision. One man holds a set of legal documents, with a government seal, while the others form a wall of meat, to cut off my escape back into the Cadillac. Marcus tries to step out, but a second vehicle, a black sedan, wedges itself against his door, trapping him inside the luxury cage. The lead man, who has the cold eyes of a butcher, informs me that I am being taken into protective custody, under an involuntary psychiatric hold. He says that Julian Sterling has filed an emergency petition, supported by 2 paid doctors, claiming I am a danger to myself. They describe my recent actions, the public accusations of identity fraud, as a psychotic break, triggered by the stress of the divorce. I feel a surge of rage, but I keep my face neutral, because any reaction will be used as evidence of my supposed mental instability. They grab my arms, their grip like iron clamps, and force me toward the open back doors of the ambulance, while the city watches in indifference. The interior of the ambulance is a sterile white box that smells of chemical cleaners and the sharp scent of a coming storm. I am strapped to a metal gurney, my wrists bound by thick nylon straps that bite into my skin with every movement. A man, who calls himself Dr. Miller, holds a syringe filled with a clear and viscous liquid that he calls a mild sedative. I look him directly in the eyes and tell him that if that needle touches my skin, I will own his medical license and his house by Monday morning. He pauses, the needle hovering inches from my arm, as he sees the absolute lack of fear in my expression. I tell him that I am the primary architect of the Aegis Corps, and my brain is currently the most valuable piece of property in New York. If he damages my cognitive functions, the board of Sterling Tech will skin him alive to recover their lost market capitalization. He looks at the man sitting in the corner, a suit from Arthur Sterling's private security, who simply nods for him to proceed. Arthur is not trying to cure me. He is trying to lobotomize the truth before it can reach a federal judge's desk. I move my hand, just enough to feel the watch, hidden beneath the cuff of my black suit. Its steady ticking a promise of survival. We arrive at the Graywood Sanitarium, a fortress of brick and iron, tucked away in a remote corner of the Hudson Valley. The facility is private, expensive, and designed to make inconvenient people disappear behind a curtain of medical confidentiality for a lifetime. I am stripped of my suit, my shoes, and my dignity, replaced by a thin paper gown that offers no protection against the cold. They try to take the watch, but I tell them it is a medical device for a chronic heart condition, and I have the forged papers to prove it. The orderly, a man with no neck and no soul, hesitates just long enough for the head nurse to intervene and allow me to keep the gold heirloom on my wrist. I am thrown into a padded room with a single light that never turns off and a camera that watches my every breath. The walls are thick, the air is stale, and the silence is a weapon designed to break the mind of anyone who values logic. Arthur thinks he has won because a woman in a madhouse has no voice and no right to file a lawsuit. He thinks he can hold me here until the Aegis Corps finally surrenders its secrets to his team of inferior engineers. The door opens 3 hours later, and Arthur Sterling walks in, looking like a man who has just successfully liquidated a failing branch of his own soul. He stands in the center of the room, his expensive shoes making no sound on the padded floor. As he looks down at me, he tells me that Silas Vance is a dead man walking, and the bloodline documents have already been shredded by his private security team. He says that the world believes I am a tragic figure, a brilliant mind that snapped under the pressure of $1 billion life. He offers me a deal, a comfortable life in a villa in the south of France, if I hand over the master decryption keys. I look at him, and I start to laugh, a sound that echoes off the padded walls and makes his eyes narrow in a cold fury. I tell him that he is an oxygen thief, a bad investment, who is still trying to trade with a currency that no longer exists. I tell him that the Aegis Corps has already detected my absence, and it is currently beginning the process of erasing every Sterling family record from history. His face turns a deep purple, and he leans in, his breath hot against my ear, as he whispers that I will never, Leave this room with a functioning brain. Arthur leaves, and the heavy iron door locks with a sound that feels like a coffin lid, being nailed shut for eternity. I wait for the camera to scan to the left, and then I press the hidden button on the side of my father's gold pocket watch. The watch is not a timepiece. It is a low-frequency transmitter that my father built for a war that he never got to finish. It emits a signal that is too low for the facility's jammers to detect, but it is perfectly tuned to the Aegis Corps' master receiver. I enter a sequence of 3 rapid taps, followed by a long pause, which is the emergency code for a hostile kidnapping. The Aegis Corps, which is now hosted on a decentralized cloud of 1,000 servers, receives the signal and begins to triangulate my exact coordinates. In a basement office, halfway across the world, Silas Vance sees the red dot blinking on his screen and knows that the hunt has finally begun. The watch begins to heat up, its internal battery straining to broadcast through the thick walls of the sanitarium, but it holds the connection. I am not a prisoner. I am a beacon, and the entire power of the Aegis system is now focused on this single point. In the woods, the head nurse returns with 2 orderlies and a tray containing a heavy dose of Thorazine, designed to keep me quiet for days. She tells me that it is time for my medicine, and that I should make it easy on myself by not fighting the inevitable. I look at the clock on the wall, seeing that it has been exactly 10 minutes since I sent the signal to the Aegis master receiver. I tell her that she has exactly 60 seconds to open that door before the power grid of this building is permanently removed from the map. She laughs, a dry and cruel sound, and signals for the orderlies to pin me down to the cold and hard metal bed. Suddenly, the light in the ceiling begins to flicker, and the sound of 100 fire alarms erupts throughout the entire facility in a deafening chorus. The computer system that controls the electronic locks and the security cameras begins to reboot in an endless and frantic loop. The Aegis Corps has reached out from the digital void, and it is currently tearing the Greywood Sanitarium apart, bite by bite. The orderlies hesitate, their eyes darting toward the ceiling, as the smell of burning electrical wires begins to fill the small and padded room. I kick the tray out of the nurse's hand, the glass vials shattering on the floor, and the clear liquid soaking into the thick and dirty padding. I stand up, the paper gown fluttering in the sudden draft from the ventilation system, which is now blowing at its maximum capacity. I tell the nurse that the doors are now open, and she should run before the local police arrive to investigate the mass escape. The electronic lock on the door clicks open as the Aegis system bypasses the facility's main server and takes control of the physical security. I walk out of the room, my bare feet cold on the tiled floor, but my heart is burning with a fire that Arthur Sterling cannot extinguish. I see other patients stepping out of their rooms, their faces filled with a mixture of confusion and a sudden, terrifying hope for a new life. I am not just escaping. I am leading a revolution, and the fortress of the Sterlings is falling down around their ears. I reach the main lobby, seeing the security guards struggling to reboot their consoles, while the giant monitors display the stylized letter A. My brother Silas is standing at the front gates, a tactical team of private contractors behind him, ready to end this charade. We move through the woods toward the waiting helicopters, while the sirens of the state police begin to wail in the distance behind us. I look back at the sanitarium, seeing the smoke rising from the roof as the electrical fire consumes the evidence of Arthur's crimes. I have the watch, I have my mind, and I have the location of the original bloodline records that Silas found in the archives. Arthur tried to call me crazy, but he just gave me the perfect legal reason to sue him for every dollar his family ever made. We climb into the helicopter, the blades cutting through the cold night air as we lift off and head back toward the lights of Manhattan. I look at my hands, seeing the bruises from the straps, and I realize that the $1 check was only the beginning of the cost. I am going to make Arthur pay for every second I spent in that room and every drop of medicine he tried to force into my veins. The war is no longer a civil matter. It is a criminal conspiracy, and I am the primary witness for the prosecution. As we fly over the city, I see the Sterling Tower, glowing like a target, in the middle of the dark and concrete jungle. It is time to take the throne, and to let the world know who the real alpha of New York is. Arthur Sterling stands at the polished mahogany podium, his voice projected through the massive speakers of the main auditorium. He tells the 60 board members that Evelyn Vance is suffering from a severe and tragic mental breakdown in a private clinic. He claims she has legally signed her rights to the Aegis Corps over to the Sterling Family Trust due to her total incapacity. The room is silent, the air filled with the scent of expensive cologne and the sweat of men waiting to profit from a corpse. Suddenly, the heavy steel doors at the back groan open and strike the walls with a dull and heavy thud. I walk into the room, my bare feet silent on the carpet, wearing the thin and wrinkled paper gown from the Greywood Sanitarium. My hair is messy. My wrists are bruised from the nylon straps, but my eyes are burning with a cold fire. I look like a victim of a war that Arthur thought he had already won in the shadows. The cameras of the major networks, already live streaming the meeting, pivot toward me like 100 hungry eyes. I do not say a word. I simply walk toward the front of the room, letting the world see the physical evidence of Arthur Sterling's brand of family values. Julian stands up, his face turning the color of ash as he grips the edge of his chair. He tries to speak, but the words die in his throat. As I reach the edge of the stage, Arthur grips the podium so hard that the wood begins to creak, and he tells the security to remove the intruder. I look at the lead guard, and I tell him to stay, exactly where he is, if he wants to avoid a felony charge. I turn toward the board, and I show them my wrists, the red marks of the restraints, glowing under the bright stage lights. I tell them that this is the medical treatment Arthur provides for the woman who built his billion-dollar empire. I explain that the Greywood Sanitarium is a black site for inconvenient people, and Arthur paid $1 million to have me disappeared. The live stream numbers are climbing into the millions as the hashtag for the Sterling kidnapping begins to trend across the entire world. Arthur is no longer a CEO. He is a criminal caught on a global stage, with no way to hide the truth. I pull the gold pocket watch from the pocket of my gown, and I tell the system to play the recording of the head nurse. Her voice fills the auditorium, cold and clear, as she admits Arthur Sterling ordered my permanent sedation to hide his fraud. The sound of sirens echoes from the street below as 3 black SUVs scream to a halt in front of the tower. Silas Vance walks through the doors, followed by a team of federal agents, their badges glinting with an authority that Arthur cannot buy. Marcus Thorne is right behind them, holding a stack of federal warrants that have been signed by a judge. In the last hour, he hands the primary document to Arthur Sterling and informs him that he is under arrest for kidnapping and felony conspiracy. Arthur tries to call his contacts in Washington, but Marcus tells him that the lobbyist he pays has already been detained for questioning. The board members begin to back away from Arthur, like he is a man infected with a lethal and contagious disease. I look at the chairman, and I demand an immediate vote to remove Arthur Sterling from every position within the company. I tell them that Vance Technology has already acquired 51% of the outstanding shares through a series of proxy agents. I am not asking for the company. I am the company, and Arthur is just a squatter who is being legally evicted. The federal agents move forward, their handcuffs clicking open, a sound that signals the end of the Sterling dynasty. Julian Sterling rushes toward me, his hands shaking, as he falls to his knees at the bottom of the stage stairs. He tells me that he was forced by his father to sign the commitment papers, and that he has proof. He pulls a small flash drive from his pocket and tells me that it contains every illegal transaction Arthur made in the last 10 years. He calls his father a monster, a liar, and a man who destroyed the sanctity of our marriage for his own ego. He begs for mercy, telling the board and the cameras that he is the real victim of Arthur's abuse. He thinks he can buy his way into my good graces by throwing his father under the bus. I look down at him, my expression blank, and I tell him that he is exactly like the $1 check he gave me. He is a worthless piece of paper that has no value in a world built on real intelligence. I take the flash drive, and I hand it to the federal agents. Without saying a single word of thanks, Julian realizes that his betrayal has not saved his skin, but has only provided more evidence for the fire that is consuming him. He is a rat, trying to board a sinking ship, and the water is already at his neck. I turn my attention back to the board of directors, and I tell them that Julian Sterling has a secret of his own. I play a secondary file on the auditorium screen, showing the $1 check and the original prenuptial agreement. I show them the hidden clause, where Julian admitted that the Aegis Core was a loan from a third-party developer. He used the company's hardware to host stolen property, which is a violation of every federal security law in the books. By admitting the software was a loan, he has made Sterling Tech liable for billions of dollars in unpaid licensing fees. The board members look at Julian with a hatred that is pure and cold as they realize he has bankrupted them. I tell them that I will waive the debt only if they sign a full and total transfer of all company assets to me. They have 5 minutes to decide before the Aegis Core shuts down the global banking network and blames Sterling Tech. The pressure in the room is like a physical weight, as the billionaires realize they have been outplayed by a woman in a gown. They reach for their pens, their hands shaking, as they sign the documents that end their time as masters of the universe. Arthur is being led away, his face a mask of stone, but his eyes find mine for one last second of hatred. I do not look away. I simply adjust the strap of my father's watch, and I smile at the man who lost. Julian is crying on the floor, surrounded by agents who are reading him his rights for tax evasion and fraud. The chairman of the board hands me the gavel and tells me that the chair is now officially mine for as long as I want. I walk toward the CEO's seat, the leather feeling cool against my skin, and I sit down in the center. I look at the cameras, and I tell the world that the Sterling era is dead, and the age of Vance has begun. Suddenly, the lights in the room turn a deep and blood red as a new alert flashes across every screen in the auditorium. It is not an error. It is a message from a source that should not exist, and it is addressed to me. The screen displays a single line of ancient and encrypted code that only my father knew Lamthenau to write. I realize that the war I thought was over has only just reached its most dangerous and terrifying stage. My father is not a ghost. He is a player. The crimson text on the giant boardroom monitor flickers with a frequency that only a Vance would recognize, a mathematical heartbeat hidden within the hexadecimal void. I ignore the FBI agents, who are dragging Arthur Sterling toward the elevator, and I focus on the sequence of digits that shouldn't exist in the current Aegis architecture. My father, Thomas Vance, supposedly died in a car fire 10,000 days ago, but his unique coding signature is currently rewriting the security protocols of the entire building. I pull the gold pocket watch from the pocket of my paper gown and notice the hands are spinning counterclockwise at a furious speed. I realize the watch is not just a transmitter, but a physical key, a magnetic bridge designed to unlock a floor that is not listed on any architectural blueprint. I walk toward the private express elevator, the one Arthur used to reach his penthouse, and I press the watch against the biometric scanner. The sapphire glass of the scanner turns a deep violet, and the floor indicator begins to scroll past the ground level, descending into the dark foundation of Manhattan. Marcus and Silas try to follow, but the doors slide shut with a heavy and pressurized hiss that cuts off the world of the living. The elevator drops, plunging through layers of solid granite and reinforced concrete until the display shows a single letter, Omega. The doors open to a world of white light and a silence so profound it feels like a physical weight against my eardrums. I am standing in a subterranean chamber, 300 feet below the street level, where the air is filtered to a medical grade of purity. This is not a server room. It is a cathedral of biology and silicon, where the walls are lined with glass tanks, filled with a glowing blue amniotic fluid. In the center of the room, suspended by 1,000 fiber optic cables, is a life support capsule that pulses in perfect synchronization with the Aegis core. I walk toward the capsule, my bare feet clicking on the glass floor, seeing the reflection of a woman who is no longer a victim. Inside the tank, a man is floating, his skin translucent, his body connected to a machine that looks like a parasitic crown of thorns. It is Thomas Vance, my father, but his eyes are open, and they are glowing with the same flickering red code that I saw in the boardroom. He is not just a prisoner. He is the central processing unit, the organic engine that provides the intuition for the most powerful AI on the planet. I realize that Aegis is not a software program. It is a neural map of my father's brain, stolen and digitized by a hand, much larger than Arthur Sterling's. A voice echoes through the chamber, but it does not come from a speaker. It vibrates directly into the base of my skull, through the Aegis interface. It is Arthur Sterling, speaking from his holding cell, through a hidden communication channel that he kept as a final insurance policy. He tells me that he was never the king, but merely the warden of a high-tech prison, designed by a shadow board of global investors. He says that the Sterling family name was a brand, a distraction, to hide the fact that the world's financial systems are being run by a dead man's mind. The shadow board, a group of 12 individuals, whose names are not recorded in any ledger, are the ones who ordered the car fire. They did not want to kill Thomas Vance. They wanted to own him, to harvest his genius, and to turn his conscience into a predictable algorithm. Arthur admits that he was paid $500 million to play the role of the visionary, while my father was slowly being hollowed out in this white room. Julian was never the heir. He was a backup, a secondary biological host, in case my father's neural tissue finally reached the point of total degradation. The $1 check was not an insult. It was a trigger, a signal to the board that the assets were being liquidated to make room for a new generation. I press my hand against the cold glass of the tank, and I see my father's eyes shift to focus on my face. For the first time in a decade, a single line of text appears on the interior surface of the glass, written in the same messy handwriting he used to help me with my MIT applications. Run, Evelyn, the message says, followed by a sequence of numbers that represent a self-destruct protocol for the entire Sterling infrastructure. He wants me to kill him, to delete the Aegis core, and to walk away from the empire that was built on his agony. If I trigger the sequence, the shadow board will lose their grip on the global markets, but my father will finally find the peace that Arthur Sterling stole from him. I look at the watch, the $1 check, and the bruised skin of my wrists, and I feel the weight of 1,000 impossible choices pressing down on me. I am the CEO of Vance Tech, but I am also the only daughter of a man who is being used as a hard drive. I tell the Aegis system to calculate the probability of a successful neural extraction, but the computer returns a result of 0.001%. My father is the code, and the code is him, and there is no way to separate the soul from the silicon anymore. Suddenly, the elevator behind me chimes with a sharp and warning tone, and the doors open to reveal Silas Vance, his face twisted in a look of horror. He holds a weapon, his tactical gear covered in dust, and he tells me that we have to leave, because the shadow board has activated a cleanup crew. He says that Marcus Thorne has just been detained by a group of private contractors who claim to represent the sovereign interests of a foreign central bank. Silas looks at the tank, seeing our father, and the weapon in his hand shakes as he realizes the true cost of our family's survival. He tells me that Arthur Sterling has been found dead in his cell, a victim of a sudden and highly convenient cardiac arrest, orchestrated from the outside. The board is deleting the evidence, and we are the last 2 pieces of data that they need to erase to keep the Aegis secret safe forever. I look at the tank, and then at the terminal, and I realize that the self-destruct sequence is not just for the building, but for the entire Vance bloodline. We were bred to be the processors for a digital god, and the god is now hungry for its final update. I tell Silas to hold the door, and I reach for the master override on the terminal, but the screen displays a new message in a font I have never seen. "Welcome home, Evelyn," it says, followed by a list of my biometric data and the date of my birth, 32 years ago. The shadow board is not trying to kill me. They are trying to recruit me to take my father's place as the primary host for the next generation of Aegis. They offer me a seat at the table, a position of absolute power, and the immortality of a digital existence if I simply step into the second tank. They tell me that Julian was a failure because he lacked the specific Vance neural density, but I am the perfect candidate for the final merger. I look at the blue liquid, and then at my father's glowing eyes, and I realize that the $1 divorce was just an audition for the most expensive job in history. I am not a CEO. I am the next version of a software program that is currently preparing to download my consciousness into the void. I feel a cold tingle at the base of my spine as the fiber optic cables in the ceiling begin to lower, like a forest of glowing vines toward my head. I reach for the gold pocket watch, and instead of pressing the signal button, I crush the sapphire glass with the heel of my palm, exposing the internal gears. I jam the broken metal into the primary data port of the terminal, creating a massive and irreversible electrical short circuit in the high-frequency transmitter. The room begins to shake as the Aegis core reacts to the physical intrusion of its creator's most personal heirloom. My father's eyes widen, and the red glow begins to pulse with a chaotic and violent energy as he helps me from the inside to overload the neural buffers. I tell Silas to get ready, to run, because the $1 empire is about to become a pile of ash and a memory of a crime that no one will believe. The self-destruct timer begins to count down, but it is not a sequence of numbers. It is a recording of my father's voice, counting down the seconds of his own life. 5, 4, 3. The glass of the tanks begins to crack under the pressure of the expanding blue fluid, and the room is filled with the sound of 1,000 breaking promises. We are at the bottom of the world, and the only way out is through a fire that will delete the past. I grab Silas's hand, and we dive into the elevator, just as the first tank shatters and releases a wave of cold and glowing liquid into the chamber. I look back, seeing my father give me a final and silent nod as the red light in his eyes is replaced by the white light of a total system wipe. The elevator surges upward, the speed so great that my knees buckle, and I am pressed against the cold metal floor as the foundation of the tower begins to collapse. We are rising through the dark, leaving the ghost of Thomas Vance behind, as the Aegis core is erased from the history of mankind. The Sterling Tower, the monument to greed, is now a hollow shell, and we are the only survivors of a war that never officially happened. As we reach the lobby, the building is vibrating with the sound of 1,000 falling glass windows and the screams of the city. I step out into the night, my paper gown fluttering in the wind, and I realize that I am finally free. But the cost was the only thing I ever loved. I look at the $1 check, which is now charred and blackened, and I realize that the debt has been paid in full. The salt air of the Hudson River bites into the open wounds on my arms as Silas pulls me behind a rusted shipping container. The headlights of 4 black tactical SUVs slice through the midnight fog of the New York docks, pinning us against the cold and dark water of the Atlantic. A dozen men, dressed in unmarked gray gear, step out with silenced rifles, their movements mechanical and efficient, like the algorithm they were hired to protect. I reach into the pocket of my tattered gown and feel the jagged metal of my father's broken watch, the final piece of evidence. In a world that wants me dead, Silas checks his weapon, his breath coming in short and ragged gasps as he tells me that we have exactly 3 minutes before they close the perimeter. I am not looking at the shooters. I am looking at the sky, where the Starlink satellites are passing, over Manhattan in a steady and uncaring line. My father's watch contains a microchip that he built as a failsafe, a digital suicide note that can overwrite every firewall on the planet. I do not need a tower or a server room to destroy the Sterling name. I only need a connection and the will to burn the world down to the ground. The lead mercenary, a man with a face like scarred granite, steps forward and tells me that the board has already authorized our permanent liquidation. He says that the Aegis Corps is being rebuilt in a secure facility in Northern Virginia, and my father's death was merely a scheduled system update. He offers me one last chance to surrender the master encryption keys, promising that Silas will be allowed to walk away with a clean record. I look at the charred remains of the $1 check, and I laugh, a sound that is lost in the roar of the wind and the crashing of the waves. I tell him that he is a failed investment, a man who is standing on a bridge that has already been demolished by the woman he is trying to kill. I pry the microchip from the back of the gold watch, its silicon surface glowing with a faint and ghostly red light as it senses the proximity of the global network. I press the chip against the NFC sensor of Silas's tactical radio, creating a direct bridge between the Vance bloodline and the eyes of the entire world. The air begins to hum with the static of 10,000 wireless signals as the Alpha Protocol initiates its final and most destructive command. Every digital screen in Times Square, every stock ticker in London, and every news broadcast in Tokyo suddenly flickers and turns a deep and violent crimson. The Aegis system is no longer a tool for control. It is a mirror, reflecting the faces of the 12 members of the shadow board to 5 billion people. Their bank accounts, their private emails, and their orders to assassinate Thomas Vance are being translated into every known language and broadcast in real time. I see the names of senators, of bank governors, and of tech titans scrolling past on the mercenaries' wrist-mounted tablet. The man with the scarred face freezes, his weapon lowering, as he realizes that his paymasters are currently being arrested by their own federal police forces. The financial world is screaming in 100 different currencies as the $1 trillion sterling lie is liquidated in a single and brilliant flash of digital truth. The mercenaries begin to back away, their orders cancelled by the sudden and total collapse of the power structure that gave them life. Julian Sterling is shown on the news, being led out of a hospital, in handcuffs, his face a mask of cowardice, as he realizes that the $1 divorce has cost him his soul. The sun begins to rise over the New York skyline, casting a golden light on the ruins of the Sterling Tower and the dark water of the harbor. Silas stands up, his hand on my shoulder, as he watches the black SUVs speed away into the morning traffic of the city that no longer belongs to the Sterlings. Marcus Thorne is found in a safe house in Brooklyn, as the Aegis Corps reveals the location of every political prisoner held by the Shadow Board. I stand at the edge of the pier, holding the $1 bill that started this war, its edges blackened by the fire of the 90th floor. I am no longer a liability, a gold digger, or a ghost in a machine. I am the owner of the most powerful and honest network in human history. I do not need a throne of glass and steel, because the world is now my laboratory, and the Vance name is the only currency that matters. I drop the $1 bill into the Hudson River, watching it float for a second before it is swallowed by the deep and cold current. The debt is paid, the truth is free, and the kingdom of Vance is finally ready to begin its first day of real business. I look at Silas, and then at the city, hearing the sound of 1,000 sirens in the distance, but they are no longer coming for me. They are coming for the remnants of the old world, for the men who thought they could own a human mind for the price of a lie. I reach into my pocket and find a small and perfectly functioning gold gear that fell out of my father's watch during the explosion. It is the heart of the machine, a piece of engineering that represents the only thing that Arthur Sterling could never understand, which is love. I hold it up to the sun, seeing the light reflect off its surfaces, and I realize that my father is still with me in every line of code I will ever write. The empire of Sterling was built on $1, but the empire of Vance will be built on the truth, and it will never fall. I am Evelyn Vance, the Alpha of New York, and this is not an ending. It is the first second of a new and permanent era. I turn away from the water, walking toward the city, with the steady and confident pace of a woman who has finally found her way home. The game is over, and for the first time in my life, I am the one who is holding all the cards.